Her husband kicked her out in the rain, yelling, "You're nothing."
Begging you.
Don't just
Her
sit there. Come
billionaire
on.
uncle pulled
You're
up in a
freezing.
Bentley.
Get in the car, quickly.
What he did next will leave you speechless. Pack your things and get out. You're nothing but a burden, Camila. Nothing. Those were the words Xavier Monroe screamed at his wife before shoving her into the pouring rain with nothing but the clothes on her back. He had no idea that the woman he'd just humiliated was the niece of Theodore Ashford, a man worth $4.3 billion, who was about to teach him the most expensive lesson of his life. What happened in the next 48 hours will make you rethink everything you know about karma, family loyalty, wealth, and the price of disrespect. Before we dive into this incredible story, I need you to do something for me real quick. Hit that subscribe button right now and smash that like button, because stories like this don't just find you by accident. You're here for a reason, and I promise you won't regret staying until the end. Also, drop a comment and let me know where you're watching from. Are you in Atlanta? Chicago? London? Lagos? Johannesburg? Paris? I want to know where my amazing viewers are tuning in from. Now let's get back to the story, because what happens next is absolutely wild. The rain came down in sheets that Thursday evening in the upscale neighborhood of Buckhead, each drop hitting the pavement like tiny hammers. Camila Monroe stood on the front steps of the three-story colonial she'd called home for the past 6 years, her silk blouse already soaked through, her hair plastered to her face. Behind her, the door slammed with such force that the wreath shook violently against the wood. "Xavier, please," she called out, her voice breaking. "Can we just
Please,
talk
John,
about this?"
Don't do this.
The door opened just wide enough for him to appear in the frame, his face twisted with contempt. He was still wearing the Tom Ford suit he'd worn to the office, the one she'd picked up from the dry cleaners just 3 days ago. His tie was loosened, his top button undone, and in his hand was a crystal glass with 2 fingers of bourbon. "Talk? Talk about what, Camila?" His voice dripped with venom. "About how you've been dead weight for 6 years? About how my colleagues laugh behind my back because my wife can't even hold down a simple job? About how embarrassing you are?" She flinched as if he'd struck her. "I've been trying to find work. The market is tough right now, and you know I've been sending out applications? He laughed, cold and sharp. "You've been trying for 2 years, Camila. 2 years. Meanwhile, I'm out here building an empire, closing million-dollar real estate deals, and you're what? Sitting at home watching reality television and spending my money?" "That's not fair," she whispered, tears mixing with the rain on her cheeks. "I've been taking care of the house, supporting you, supporting me." He stepped fully into the doorway now, his frame blocking the warm light from inside. "You want to know what support looks like? It looks like Vanessa. She's beautiful, she's ambitious, she has her own portfolio of investment properties. She doesn't need me. She wants me. That's the difference." The name hit her like a punch to the stomach. "Vanessa? Xavier, are you?" "Yes," he said flatly. "I'm seeing someone else. Someone who actually adds value to my life. Someone who belongs in the circles I move in. And honestly, Camila, you should have seen this coming. Look at yourself." She looked down at her soaked clothing, her bare feet on the cold concrete. She'd kicked off her house slippers when he'd pushed her out, and they lay abandoned just inside the door. 6 years, Xavier, she said, her voice steadier now despite the trembling in her hands. "I stood by you when you had nothing. When you were working at that small firm in College Park, barely making commission. I believed in you when no one else did. And I paid you back by giving you a life most women dream of." He shot back. "Designer handbags, luxury vacations, a house in one of the best zip codes in Atlanta. But it's not enough for you, is it? You still can't pull your weight." "I never asked for those things," she said quietly. "I asked for partnership. For respect. He took a long sip of his bourbon, his eyes cold and calculating. Respect is earned, Camila. And you haven't earned anything. Thunder cracked overhead, and the rain intensified. A black Audi pulled into the driveway next door, and she could feel the neighbors' eyes on them through the tinted windows. Shame burned through her chest. Please, she tried one more time. Let me come inside. We can work this out. We can go to counseling. There's nothing to work out, Xavier interrupted. I've already filed the paperwork. My attorney will be in touch about the divorce. You'll get whatever the law says you're entitled to, but don't expect generosity from me. You signed a prenup, remember? You'll walk away with exactly what you came with, nothing. He stepped back and began to close the door. Xavier, wait. At least let me get my phone, my purse. I'll have your things packed up and sent to wherever you end up, he said. Right now, I need you gone. Vanessa is coming over in an hour, and I don't need you here ruining the evening. You can't just watch me. The door closed with a final decisive click. She heard the deadbolt slide into place, then the security chain rattle as he secured it. Through the frosted glass panels on either side of the door, she could see his silhouette as he walked away, back toward the warmth and light of the home they'd built together. Camila stood there for a full minute, rain hammering down on her shoulders, soaking through to her skin. Her mind raced through the last few months, searching for signs she'd missed. The late nights Xavier claimed were client dinners, the new cologne he'd started wearing, the way he'd stopped asking about her day. The distance that had grown between them like a canyon, inch by inch, until she was standing on one side and he was miles away on the other. She turned slowly and looked out at the street. Water rushed along the gutters, carrying leaves and debris toward the storm drains. The streetlights had just come on, casting orange pools of light that shimmered in the downpour. Her car, a modest Honda Accord she'd driven for 8 years, was parked in the garage, which she no longer had access to. Her phone was charging on the kitchen counter. Her wallet was in her purse in the bedroom upstairs. She had literally nothing. No phone to call for help. No money for a cab or rideshare. No umbrella, no jacket, not even shoes. Just the realization that the man she'd loved, the man she'd sacrificed her own career ambitions for, had discarded her like trash. She started walking. She didn't know where she was going, only that she couldn't stand on that porch any longer. Her feet moved automatically, one in front of the other, splashing through puddles that soaked her leggings up to the knees. The rain was cold, much colder than it should have been for September, and she wrapped her arms around herself, trying to preserve what little warmth remained. The neighborhood was quiet, except for the storm. Most people were inside, safe and dry, probably sitting down to dinner or settling in to watch television. Through large bay windows, she glimpsed families gathered around tables, children laughing, couples cooking together. Normal life. The life she'd thought she had. She'd walked about 4 blocks when her legs began to shake. Whether from cold or shock or exhaustion, she couldn't tell. Maybe all 3. She spotted a bus stop shelter ahead, just a simple plexiglass structure with a bench, and made her way toward it. At least it would provide some protection from the rain. She collapsed onto the bench, her body finally giving in to the shivers that had been threatening since she left the house. Her teeth chattered. Her fingers had gone numb. She pulled her knees up to her chest and wrapped her arms around them, trying to make herself as small as possible. This couldn't be real. This couldn't be happening. Just this morning, she'd woken up in their bed, made coffee, kissed Xavier goodbye as he left for the office. He'd seemed distant, sure, but not cruel. Not like the man who'd just thrown her out like garbage. She thought about her mother, who'd passed away 3 years ago from cancer. Her father had died when she was 12. A heart attack. sudden and devastating. She had no siblings. Her closest friends had drifted away over the years, casualties of a marriage that had slowly isolated her from everyone who cared about her. Xavier had always said they didn't need other people, that they had each other. Now she understood it had been about control. The rain continued its relentless assault. A car passed, its headlights sweeping across the shelter, and for a moment she hoped it might stop. It didn't. Why would it? She was just another person caught in a storm. Nothing remarkable about her suffering. Camila closed her eyes and let the tears come. They mixed with the rain on her face, salt and fresh water, grief and shock. She cried for the years she'd given, for the dreams she'd deferred, for the woman she'd been before she'd met Xavier Monroe, confident, ambitious, full of fire. That woman felt like a stranger now, someone she barely remembered. She didn't hear the car approaching until it was nearly upon her. The engine was quiet, refined, barely audible over the rain. What she noticed first was the light, bright, powerful headlights that illuminated the entire shelter, turning the rain into silver streams. Then she heard the tires, the soft hiss as they rolled through the water on the pavement. The vehicle came to a smooth stop directly in front of the shelter, and through the rain-streaked plexiglass, she could make out the distinctive shape of a Bentley Continental GT, midnight black with chrome accents that caught the streetlight. The driver's side window descended with a whisper, and a man's voice called out, deep, authoritative, but laced with concern. "Camila?" She looked up, squinting through the rain and her tears. The interior light of the luxury car illuminated the driver's face, and recognition hit her like lightning. Theodore Ashford, her mother's brother, her uncle. She hadn't seen him in almost 4 years, not since her mother's funeral, and even then it had been brief. A hug, condolences, a promise to stay in touch that had faded into occasional text messages and eventually silence. Not because of any animosity, but simply because their lives existed in different orbits. He traveled constantly for business, managing a portfolio of companies that spanned 3 continents. She'd been wrapped up in her marriage, in trying to be the wife Xavier wanted. Now here he was, sitting in a vehicle that probably cost more than most people's homes, staring at her with an expression that shifted rapidly from surprise to confusion to something that looked like rage. "Uncle Theo?" Her voice came out small, broken. He was out of the car in seconds, leaving it running, not caring that rain immediately soaked his charcoal wool coat. He crossed to the shelter in 3 long strides and knelt in front of her, his hands reaching for her face, tilting it up toward the light. "What in God's name?" He stopped, his jaw clenching as he took in her appearance. Her soaked clothes, her bare feet, the vacant look in her eyes. "Camila, what happened? Where's Xavier?" At the mention of her husband's name, she broke down completely. Sobs racked her body, violent and uncontrollable, and she couldn't form words. Theodore pulled her into his arms, and she collapsed against his chest, feeling the expensive fabric of his coat beneath her cheek, smelling the faint scent of cedar and something else. Safety, maybe, or just the presence of someone who actually cared. "It's all right," he said, his voice low and steady. "I've got you now. You're safe." He held her for a long moment, letting her cry it out, one hand smoothing her wet hair back from her face. When the sobs finally subsided into hiccups and shaky breaths, he pulled back just enough to look at her. "Can you walk to the car?" She nodded, not trusting her voice. He helped her to her feet, keeping one arm firmly around her waist, supporting most of her weight. Her bare feet stumbled on the wet pavement, and he noticed immediately. "You don't even have shoes," he said, and there was something dangerous in his tone now. Theodore didn't wait for an explanation. He simply bent down and lifted her into his arms as if she weighed nothing, carrying her the few steps to the Bentley. He opened the passenger door with one hand, settled her gently into the leather seat, then reached into the back and pulled out a cashmere blanket, wrapping it around her shoulders. "Don't move," he said, then jogged around to the driver's side. The moment he was back in the car, he cranked the heat up to maximum. Warm air flooded the cabin, and Camila felt her body begin to thaw, though the shaking didn't stop. Theodore pulled away from the curb smoothly, the powerful engine barely making a sound as they accelerated down the street. "Where are we going?" she managed to ask. "My hotel, the St. Regis. I flew in this afternoon for a business meeting tomorrow." He glanced at her, his expression hard. "But first, you're going to tell me what happened. And I want the truth, Camila. All of it." So she told him. The words came haltingly at first. Then, in a rush, Xavier's cruelty. The affair. Being thrown out without her phone or wallet or shoes. Theodore's hands tightened on the steering wheel until his knuckles went white. But he didn't interrupt. He just drove, listening, his jaw set in a way that reminded her painfully of her mother when she was angry. By the time she finished, they were pulling into the circular driveway of the St. Regis. A valet immediately appeared with an umbrella, but Theodore waved him off, coming around to lift Camila from the car again. "Mr. Ashford, sir, shall I?" the valet began. "Park it. Presidential suite. Send up the concierge immediately." Theodore's tone left no room for discussion. He carried her through the gleaming lobby, past marble columns and crystal chandeliers, past guests in evening wear who stared with a mixture of curiosity and concern. Camila kept her face buried against his shoulder, mortified but too exhausted to care. The elevator ride was silent except for the soft classical music playing overhead. The presidential suite was on the 23rd floor, a sprawling space with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the Atlanta skyline. Theodore carried her straight to one of the bedrooms, setting her down on the edge of a king-sized bed with Egyptian cotton sheets. "Stay here," he said, disappearing into the bathroom. She heard water running, and when he returned, he had a plush white robe in his hands. "There's a hot bath ready. Take as long as you need. I'm calling down for food and clothes. What size are you?" "8," she whispered. "But Uncle Theo, you don't have to." "Yes, I do." He placed the robe in her hands. "Your mother was my baby sister Camila, the only family I had that mattered. When she died, I promised myself I'd look after you. I failed at that. I got caught up in acquisitions and board meetings and forgot what actually matters. That ends tonight." Tears spilled down her cheeks again. "I didn't want to bother you. I know you're busy. Nothing," he said firmly, "is more important than family. Nothing. Now go get warm before you catch pneumonia." She obeyed, her body moving on autopilot. The bathroom was larger than her and Xavier's bedroom had been, all marble and gold fixtures. The bathtub was already filled with steaming water, and someone had placed expensive bath oils on the edge. She peeled off her soaked clothes, letting them fall in a heap on the heated floor, and sank into the water. The heat was almost painful at first, but slowly her muscles began to unclench. She stayed there until the water started to cool, washing her hair with shampoo that smelled like jasmine and honey, scrubbing her skin until it was pink. When she finally emerged, wrapping herself in the robe Theodore had provided, she felt almost human again. In the bedroom, she found shopping bags from Neiman Marcus on the bed, designer clothes, still with tags attached, a pair of dark jeans, a soft cream sweater, undergarments, even a pair of Italian leather flats. Everything fit perfectly. She dressed slowly, her movements careful, as if she might shatter if she moved too quickly. When she emerged into the suite's main living area, Theodore was on the phone, pacing in front of the windows. He wore reading glasses now, and his coat was gone, replaced by shirt sleeves rolled up to his elbows. I don't care what time it is in New York, he was saying. Wake him up. I need Marcus at the firm to start digging immediately. Full financial disclosure, asset investigation, the works? Yes. On Xavier Monroe. Monroe, real estate developer here in Atlanta, because he just made the biggest mistake of his life, that's why. He noticed Camila and held up one finger. I'll send over the details in an hour. Bill it to my personal account. He ended the call and gestured to the dining table, where room service had laid out an elaborate spread: soup, salad, salmon, pasta, dessert. Sit. Eat. You need food in you. She sat, and despite thinking she had no appetite, found herself ravenous once she started eating. Theodore sat across from her with a glass of scotch, watching her with an expression that was part concern, part calculation. Feel better? He asked when she'd finished the soup. Yes. Thank you. For everything. He waved it off. Now, I need you to walk me through Xavier's business. What does he actually do? Who does he work with? What assets do you know about? She frowned. Why? Because Theodore said, setting down his glass, I'm going to dismantle his entire world, piece by piece. And I need to know where to start. Uncle Theo, I appreciate what you're trying to do, but Xavier is connected. He has powerful clients, political relationships. His firm handles some of the biggest commercial real estate transactions in the Southeast. I'm aware, Theodore said dryly. I looked him up while you were in the bath. Monroe Development Group. Privately held. Annual revenue around $40 million. Impressive for a small operation. He paused. But here's what your husband doesn't know. His biggest client, Piedmont Property Holdings, is a subsidiary of a company I acquired 2 months ago. Camila blinked. What? Piedmont Property Holdings represents about 30% of his annual business. They're the ones financing his new mixed-use development downtown, the one that's supposed to break ground next month. $120 million project. Theodore's smile was cold. As of tomorrow morning, that financing disappears. You can't just. I absolutely can. Piedmont's credit facility is under my authority now. One phone call, and Xavier's flagship project dies before it starts. He leaned forward. But I'm not stopping there. I'm going to have my legal team examine every deal he's closed in the past 5 years. Every permit, every zoning variance, every contract. If there's even a hint of impropriety, I'll find it, and I'll use it. Camila felt a chill that had nothing to do with her earlier exposure to the rain. She'd never seen her uncle like this, focused, dangerous, every word precise as a scalpel. This was Theodore Ashford in business mode, the man who'd built a fortune by outthinking and outmaneuvering everyone around him. Why? She asked quietly. Why go to all this trouble? He looked at her as if the question itself was offensive. Because he hurt you. Because he threw you out like trash. Because he disrespected my niece, and by extension, he disrespected me and the memory of your mother. He picked up his scotch again, swirling the amber liquid. But mostly because men like Xavier need to learn that actions have consequences, especially when they harm people who can't fight back. I can fight back, she said, but her voice lacked conviction. Not alone, you can't. Not against someone with his resources and connections. Theodore's expression softened slightly. But you're not alone anymore, Camila. You have me. And trust me when I say, I'm a lot more terrifying than Xavier Monroe could ever hope to be. She believed him. The Theodore Ashford she remembered from childhood had been warm and funny, always bringing expensive gifts and telling stories about his travels. This version was something else entirely. A billionaire who'd clawed his way up from nothing. Who'd survived hostile takeovers and corporate warfare, who knew exactly how to hurt someone where it mattered most. What about Vanessa? She heard herself ask. The mistress? Theodore pulled out his phone, scrolling through something. Vanessa Chen, investment broker. Works at Sterling Capital Management, also married, interestingly enough, though separated. He looked up. Do you want me to? No, Camila said quickly. She's not the problem. Xavier is. Fair enough. He made a note on his phone. Though I imagine her employer might be interested to know she's having an affair with a client. Sterling has a fairly strict ethics policy about that sort of thing. Despite everything, Camila almost smiled. You're ruthless. I prefer thorough. He stood, walking to the windows. The rain had finally stopped, and the city lights sparkled against the dark sky. Tomorrow morning, we're going to go to your house. You're going to collect your belongings. All of them. I'll have movers and security there to make sure Xavier doesn't try anything stupid. He won't let me in. He will when the police tell him to. You're still legally married, which means you still have rights to that property and everything in it. Theodore turned back to face her. Then we're going to see my attorney. You're filing for divorce, but you're also going to contest that prenup. I'm betting Xavier had you sign it without proper legal representation, which makes it potentially invalid. I don't want his money, Camila said. It's not about the money. It's about making him pay for what he did. Theodore came back to the table, sitting down across from her. But more importantly, it's about making sure you're taken care of. You gave him 6 years of your life. You supported him when he was nobody. That has value, legally and morally. She looked down at her hands, folded in her lap. I don't know what to say. You don't have to say anything. Just let me handle this. Let me be the family you needed me to be 4 years ago. His voice roughened slightly. Your mother made me promise, you know. Right before she died. She made me swear I'd look after you if anything happened, that I wouldn't let you struggle alone. I broke that promise by being too wrapped up in my own world. I won't make that mistake again. Fresh tears pricked at Camila's eyes, but these felt different, warmer, less desperate. I've missed you, Uncle Theo. I've missed you too, sweetheart. He reached across the table and squeezed her hand. Now, let's talk about what you want to do. Not about Xavier, not about revenge, about your life. What do you want? It was a question no one had asked her in years. She sat with it for a moment, letting herself actually consider it. I want to finish my degree, she said finally. I was 2 semesters away from my EMBA when I dropped out to support Xavier's career. He said it didn't matter, that we didn't need the debt. You're going back to school, Theodore said immediately. Full tuition, covered. What else? I want my own career, something that's mine, that I build. She felt courage building in her chest, a spark that had been dormant for too long. I used to want to work in corporate strategy, maybe consulting. Then that's what you'll do. I'll make some calls, get you interviews at the top firms in the city. You'll have to earn the position on your own merit, but I can get you in the door. He was making notes on his phone again. What else? I want to feel like myself again, like the woman I was before I met Xavier. Strong. Independent. Not afraid. Theodore looked up, and his eyes were fierce with pride. That woman is still in there, Camila. She just needs a reminder that she never really left. And over the next few weeks, we're going to make sure Xavier Monroe remembers her too, right before we destroy everything he thinks makes him powerful. She should have felt guilty about the vindictive pleasure that rushed through her at those words. She should have been above revenge, above wanting to see him suffer. But sitting there in that luxury suite, warm and safe and no longer alone, all she felt was a grim satisfaction. Xavier had thrown her away because he thought she was nothing. He was about to learn exactly how wrong he'd been. Part 3, 2000, Camila woke the next morning in a bed so comfortable it felt like floating. For a disoriented moment, she forgot where she was, then the previous night came rushing back, and she sat up quickly, heart pounding. Sunlight streamed through the floor-to-ceiling windows, painting the luxurious bedroom in shades of gold. She could hear movement in the other room, the quiet murmur of Theodore's voice as he spoke on the phone. The clock on the nightstand read 8047 am. She showered quickly, dressed in fresh clothes that had been laid out, another shopping bag from Saks Fifth Avenue, and emerged to find Theodore at the dining table, surrounded by paperwork and 2 laptops. He was on a video call, but he gestured for her to help herself to the breakfast spread that had been delivered. "And I want the forensic accountant on this by noon," he was saying to whoever was on the screen. "Every tax return, every LLC, every offshore account if he has them. I want to know where every dollar came from and where it went." He paused, listening. "Excellent. Keep me updated." He closed the laptop and turned to Camila. "Good morning. How did you sleep?" "Better than I have in months, actually." She poured herself coffee from a silver carafe, savoring the rich aroma. "Uncle Theo, about yesterday, is still happening," he interrupted gently. "Unless you've changed your mind?" She thought about Xavier's face as he'd called her nothing. The contempt in his voice, the way he'd mentioned Vanessa so casually, as if her heartbreaking was just an inconvenient detail. "No," she said firmly. "I haven't changed my mind." "Good, because we have a busy day ahead." He glanced at his watch, a platinum Patek Philippe that probably cost more than Xavier's car. "The movers arrive at your house at 11. My security team will be there at 10:45. My attorney, Diane Richardson, will meet us there at 11:15. She's the best family law specialist in the state, and she's already started preliminary work on your case." Camila's hands trembled slightly as she set down her coffee cup. "What if Xavier gets violent?" "He's never hit me, but yesterday he was so angry he won't touch you," Theodore said, and there was steel in his voice. "Not with my security there, not with cameras recording everything, and certainly not after the conversation I plan to have with him." They left the hotel at 10:30 in Theodore's Bentley. The morning was crisp and clear, all traces of last night's storm washed away except for puddles that reflected the blue sky. As they drove through Buckhead, Camila watched the familiar streets pass by, feeling like a completely different person than the woman who'd walked them in the rain 12 hours ago. When they pulled onto her street, Xavier's street now, she supposed, she spotted the moving truck already parked at the curb. 2 large men in black uniforms stood near a black SUV, clearly security. A silver Mercedes was parked behind them, and a woman in a sharp burgundy pantsuit was stepping out. "That's Diane," Theodore said, parking behind the Mercedes. Diane Richardson was in her mid-50s, with silver-streaked hair pulled back in an elegant chignon and the kind of confidence that comes from winning battles in courtrooms. She shook Camila's hand firmly, her grip warm and reassuring. "Mrs. Monroe, I'm so sorry about what you're going through. But I promise you, we're going to make this right." She turned to Theodore. "Shall we?" They approached the house as a group, Theodore, Camila, Diane, and the 2 security guards. Theodore rang the doorbell. They could hear movement inside, then Xavier's voice, irritated. "What now?" The door opened, and Xavier's expression cycled rapidly through confusion, recognition, and something that might have been fear when he saw the assembled group on his doorstep. He was wearing workout clothes, probably just back from his morning run. "Camila, what's going on? Who are these people?" "Mr. Monroe," Diane said smoothly, stepping forward. "I'm Diane Richardson, representing your wife in divorce proceedings." Under Georgia law, Mrs. Monroe has the right to collect her personal belongings from the marital residence. We're here to facilitate that process. Xavier's face darkened. You can't just show up here with an army and— Actually, we can, Diane interrupted. Would you prefer we involve the police? I have a judge on standby who will grant us immediate access if necessary. Theodore stepped forward, and suddenly the temperature seemed to drop 10 degrees. He was several inches taller than Xavier and used every bit of that height advantage as he looked down at the younger man. Xavier Monroe, he said quietly. We haven't been formally introduced. I'm Theodore Ashford, Camila's uncle. Recognition flickered in Xavier's eyes. Everyone in business circles knew the Ashford name. I believe you threw my niece out in the rain last night, Theodore continued, his voice deadly calm. Barefoot, without her phone or money. After calling her nothing. Is that correct? Xavier swallowed hard, his bravado faltering. That's between me and my wife, wrong answer. Theodore's smile was predatory. See, when you disrespected Camila, you disrespected me. And I take that very personally. So here's what's going to happen. You're going to let us in. You're going to let my niece collect every single thing that belongs to her. And you're going to stand there quietly while it happens. Do you understand? And if I refuse? Then I make a phone call, Theodore said, pulling out his phone and pulling up a contact. This is James Whitmore, CEO of Piedmont Property Holdings. You know that name, don't you? The company financing your $120 million development downtown? The color drained from Xavier's face. Piedmont is owned by Ashford Consolidated Holdings, which means I own your future, Xavier. So ask yourself, is your pride worth losing the biggest deal of your career? Theodore's finger hovered over the call button. Because I can end that project before breakfast is over. There was a long, tense silence. Camila watched emotions war across Xavier's face. Anger, fear, calculation. Finally, he stepped aside. Fine, take whatever you want. Excellent choice, Theodore said, gesturing for the movers to enter. For the next 2 hours, Camila walked through the house she'd lived in for 6 years, pointing out what belonged to her. Clothes, jewelry, photographs of her mother, books, personal items. The movers worked efficiently, packing everything into labeled boxes. Xavier watched from the living room sofa, his expression thunderous, while one of Theodore's security guards stood nearby. Diane accompanied Camila through each room, making notes on an iPad. The artwork in the hallway. Did you select that? Yes, I bought it at an art fair with my own money, before we were married. Then it comes with you. Diane made a note. The dining room table? Wedding gift from my mother. Noted. We'll take it. When they reached the bedroom, Camila paused at the doorway. The king-sized bed was unmade, sheets tangled. On the nightstand on what used to be her side was a framed photo of her and Xavier on their wedding day, face down. On his side was a new photo, Xavier and Vanessa at what looked like a restaurant, both dressed up, both smiling. Take everything that's yours, Diane said gently. Don't leave him with any ammunition. So Camila did. Her clothes, her shoes, her jewelry. The antique vanity that had belonged to her grandmother, even the expensive coffee maker she'd bought last year because Xavier complained the old one was too slow. By the time they finished, the house looked gutted. Empty spaces on walls where artwork had hung. The dining room bare. Closets half empty. Xavier's face grew darker with each box that was carried out. But he didn't say a word. Theodore's presence kept him silent. Finally, when the last box was loaded, Diane approached Xavier with a folder. Mr. Monroe, you've been served. She handed him the divorce papers. You'll want to get an attorney, a good one. We'll be challenging the validity of the prenuptial agreement, and we'll be seeking equitable distribution of all marital assets, spousal support, and compensation for Mrs. Monroe's contributions to your career advancement." Xavier's hands shook as he took the folder. "This is insane." She agreed to the prenup. Under duress and without independent legal counsel, Diane said smoothly, "Any first-year law student could get it thrown out, but we'll let the judge decide." Theodore stepped forward one last time. "Oh, and Xavier? You'll be receiving a call from Piedmont this afternoon. They're pulling out of your development deal. Something about incompatible values with their parent company." His smile was razor-sharp. "I'm sure you'll find other financing. Eventually. Though I wouldn't hold my breath." Xavier's face went from red to white. "You can't do this. That project represents 2 years of work. Then you should have thought about that before you threw away 6 years of my niece's life." Theodore turned to Camila. "Ready to go?" She took one last look at the house, at the life she'd tried so hard to build, at the man she'd thought she knew. Xavier was staring at the divorce papers, his hands trembling, his expression a mixture of rage and panic. "Yes," she said. "I'm ready." They walked out together, leaving Xavier standing in the empty dining room, surrounded by the consequences of his cruelty. In the Bentley, as Theodore drove away from the house, Camila felt something shift inside her chest. Not happiness exactly, but a kind of fierce satisfaction. A sense that justice, however imperfect, was beginning to take shape. "Where to now?" Theodore asked. "Your office," Diane said from the back seat, where she'd joined them. "We need to start building the case. Camila, I'll need you to walk me through the financial arrangement of your marriage. Who paid for what career sacrifices you made, how much you contributed." After that, Theodore added, "We're having lunch. There's someone I want you to meet, Marcus Chen, my head of strategic development. He's always looking for sharp minds, and I told him about your background in business strategy. Uncle Theo, I haven't worked in years, so. You're smart, you're hungry, and you've just learned a masterclass in what happens when you underestimate people." He glanced at her. "Marcus runs a team that handles billion-dollar acquisitions. He needs people who can think strategically and aren't afraid to get their hands dirty. Sound like anyone you know?" Despite everything, Camila felt a smile tugging at her lips. "Are you offering me a job?" "I'm offering you an opportunity to interview for one. What you do with it is up to you." He pulled into the parking garage of a gleaming high-rise in Midtown. "But something tells me you're going to surprise everyone, including yourself, with what you're capable of." 3 weeks later, Camila stood in front of the floor-to-ceiling windows of Theodore's office on the 40th floor, looking out over Atlanta. The city sprawled below her, vast and glittering in the afternoon sun. Behind her, Theodore was on a conference call with his legal team, discussing the latest developments in her divorce case. Xavier's flagship development had collapsed when Piedmont pulled out. He'd scrambled to find alternative financing, but word had gotten around, quietly, discreetly, that Xavier Monroe was not someone you wanted to do business with. Deals that had seemed certain suddenly fell through. Clients started taking meetings with competing firms. His annual revenue had dropped by 40% in less than a month. The prenup had been thrown out, just as Diane predicted. The judge had ruled that Camila had signed under pressure without proper legal representation, rendering it invalid. Now they were in negotiations for a settlement that would give her a substantial portion of the marital assets, including equity in Xavier's company. But the money wasn't what mattered to Camila anymore. What mattered was the woman looking back at her from the reflection in the glass. Confident, purposeful, alive in a way she hadn't been in years. She'd aced her interview with Marcus Chen and started work the following week as a junior strategist. The work was challenging, demanding, everything she'd been craving. She was back in school too, taking night classes to finish her MBA. Theodore had been right. She just needed a reminder that the strong, capable woman she'd been hadn't disappeared. She'd just been buried under years of being told she wasn't enough. And make sure Xavier's attorney understands we're not interested in negotiating further, Theodore was saying. He can accept our terms, or we can go to trial. His choice. He ended the call and joined Camila at the window. "Penny, for your thoughts?" "I was just thinking about that night," she said, "standing in the rain, thinking my life was over. And now? Now I realize it was just beginning." She turned to face him. "Thank you, Uncle Theo, for everything, for showing up when I needed you most." He pulled her into a hug. "That's what family does, sweetheart. We show up." Her phone buzzed with a text. She glanced at it and couldn't help smiling. It was from Marcus. "Great work on the Henderson analysis. Presenting it to the board tomorrow. You're coming with me." "Good news?" Theodore asked. "The best kind." She pocketed her phone and looked back out at the city. "Xavier once told me I didn't belong in his elite circle. He was right. I belong somewhere much better." Theodore laughed, rich and warm. "Damn right you do." 6 months later, Camila walked into the ballroom of the Four Seasons for Atlanta's Business Excellence Awards. She wore a midnight blue evening gown, her natural hair styled in elegant braids, and she carried herself with the poise of someone who'd walked through fire and emerged stronger. She was there as part of Theodore's team, representing Ashford Consolidated Holdings. Marcus had invited her to join him at their table after the Henderson acquisition, which she'd played a key role in analyzing, had closed successfully, earning the company $200 million in profit. Halfway through dinner, she spotted him. Xavier, across the room at a table near the back. He looked thinner, tired. His suit was still expensive, but it hung on him differently now. He was with a woman who wasn't Vanessa. His attorney had mentioned that relationship had ended badly once Vanessa's firm found out about the affair. Their eyes met across the ballroom. Camila saw recognition, then something else, regret, maybe, or just the bitter acknowledgement of how thoroughly he'd miscalculated. She smiled at him, a small, genuine smile. Not cruel, not mocking. Just the smile of someone who'd moved on to better things. Then she turned back to her table, to Theodore and Marcus and Diane and the life she'd built from the ashes of her marriage. Xavier looked away first. Later that night, as she and Theodore drove back through the city, he asked her the question she'd been asking herself. "Any regrets?" She thought about it honestly. About the 6 years she'd given Xavier, the dreams she'd deferred, the pain of that night in the rain. "No," she said finally. "Because if none of that had happened, I wouldn't be here now. I wouldn't have remembered who I really am, and I wouldn't have you back in my life." Theodore squeezed her hand. "Your mother would be so proud of you. I hope you know that." "I do." And she meant it. As they drove through the glittering streets of Atlanta, Camila looked out at the city lights and thought about the girl who'd been thrown out in the rain, barefoot and broken. That girl had needed saving. But the woman she'd become didn't need saving anymore. She'd learned to save herself, with a little help from family who refused to let her fall. Xavier had called her nothing, and for a moment she'd believed him. But nothing, she'd learned, was just the starting point. The place from which everything else could be built. And she'd built something extraordinary from it. A career, a future, and most importantly, a sense of self that no one could ever take away again. The Bentley turned onto her street, a beautiful townhouse in Virginia Highland that Theodore had helped her purchase. It was smaller than the house she'd shared with Xavier, but it was hers. Every piece of furniture, every painting, every book on the shelves belonged to her, and represented her taste, her choices, her life. "Good night, Uncle Theo," she said, kissing his cheek. "Thank you for the ride. Any time, sweetheart." Board meeting Tuesday morning, 9 sharp. "I'll be there." She watched the Bentley pull away, then turned to her front door, keys in hand. As she unlocked it and stepped inside, she thought about how far she'd traveled from that bus stop shelter, not just in distance, but in every way that mattered. Xavier had kicked her out in the rain, yelling, "You're nothing." He'd been wrong. She'd always been something. She just needed the rain to wash away everything that wasn't truly her, leaving only the unbreakable core beneath. And that core, it turned out, was made of steel. So what do you think? Did Camila deserve her comeback? Would you have handled it differently? Drop your thoughts in the comments below. And if you enjoyed this story, don't forget to hit that subscribe button and like this video. I've got more incredible true-to-life stories coming your way, and you won't want to miss them. Until next time, remember, never let anyone tell you you're nothing, because you're always something extraordinary waiting to happen.